So welcome everybody. This is the September installment 2025 of Textile of the Month series. Today we're talking about Mayusugata. Okay. Mayusugata is a non-woven silk. Mayu usually refers to the silk from the cocoon that's not in woven form. Okay. Now what happened was the sample that you just saw, I ordered that through the mail, not being quite sure because the vendors often, almost always describe that particular type of textile as being washi or paper.
Paper.
Okay? And it's not, okay? Well, I mean, I knew it wasn't when I saw it, but then sometimes it's like, well, what do I know? Maybe it is, but my gut feeling was that it wasn't, but I had nothing to prove it. And then one day, what happened was the sample you just saw arrived with this label on it. Okay, so now I had proof positive. And so what it says at the top here is Mayu Sungata, okay, or the Chinese characters. And then it goes along to talk about how this particular piece was made by creating a frame, stretching a fabric. I'm giving you a little bit more detail that says stretching a fabric across it and letting the silkworms meander across it. Okay, so it was made right to the width of the obi. And then it goes on to extol the virtues of it, talks about how light it is, how, as a natural sort of serendipitous type of fabric, each piece is unique and so on. Okay, so in addition to that, as part of the label, what we had was this additional information. So this is talking about ancient weaves and stuff, again, Mayu Sanata, and this is talking about all the types of fabrics that we have are done by specialists and so on, but this is a really unique one. So here you see the frame, you see the silkworms meandering, and then the final product that they peel off. So what happened was that, as I mentioned, arrived in the mail. It just so happened that that evening, and I was really excited about it. It just so happens that that evening I was giving a lecture for a guild down in the Bay Area, and a friend was there, Barbara Shapiro. Now, Barbara is a very talented indigo dyer herself. She teaches many classes in that, but she's also an incredible basket weaver. So there are many talented people in the audience, I'm glad to say. And as I was sharing this fabric with them and showing the labels and how excited I was because I'd never seen this anywhere outside of the samples I had, she piped up and let me know that somewhere along she had seen it before, okay? And she had a sharp memory, so she went home and dug through her library and found this book that she had. So this is about the Miao people, or Hmong as we sometimes call them, also of China. And in this book was a few pages devoted to it. So here now you see what the Chinese call it. Um, Mayu Sugata in Japanese, Mayu means this cocoon, okay? And Sugata or silk, Sugata means shape. So it's, again, non-woven silk that we've done in a shape, flat, square. Their characters mean the same thing, but it's written differently. So it's flat, board or sheet, okay, board. Again, the silk, okay. So flat sheets of silk is what their term is for it. And then you may not be able to read the English in this. I don't read Chinese. It says silkworms. Um,
Spin,
Oh, thank
spin.
you. Yeah, mine it's a little bit cloudy. So silkworms spin flat cocoons on a board similar to a sheet of paper or felt in, and I can't pronounce the Chinese names, I'm sorry, but it gives the region. And then the Miao people dye and use them for applique.
Applique.
So some of the other pages, what they're doing is they are then showing you illustrations of this. It's not really a felt because the fibers aren't holding together the same way felt does, but this stuck together silk strands, they would dye that, cut it out as if it were felt, and then piece it onto their clothing. Okay. So it was fantastic to have that information from Barbara. And then again, you can see illustrations in the book that are somewhat similar to the photos that were shown in the pamphlet that came with mine. Now, just to review quickly, a silkworm usually will find some structure to attach to. Often they'll use these little boxes, but in the wild it would be twigs. It reaches out and grabs hold of a surface to start spinning the general structure in which it produces its cocoon. And then, of course, we go ahead and kill the worm, reel the silk, and prepare it for market, as you saw with the woman just earlier. Now, what happens if you don't have a texture like this box that's easy to grab hold of, or is clearly defined in shape, or no twigs, or whatever else? Well, if you take an experiment and you just put the same silkworm into a clear plastic cup, it will try. It's frustrating for it, but
Poor thing.
eventually it'll find some of the silk to latch on somewhere, and it will continue to build some sort of structure to then allow itself to do its cocoon. Okay. Um, so once it has this done, again, it goes ahead with the rest of its cycle and creates its chrysalis and will eventually change into a moth. Okay. And then once we get past that, let's look at the next extension of that then. What happens if it doesn't even have so much as a cup? What happens if it only has a flat plane, nothing to reach up for, nothing to grab, nothing but just this flat surface upon which it's walking at this point? What happens with the silk then? Let's take a look at that here. So here we have just a flat surface, the top of a box even. They've released all of the silkworms on it. They're trying their best to create a cocoon. They're crawling over each other, trying to do this, hanging off the edge, trying to do this, but there's nothing to grab hold of. So in this case, if we do a close-up, you'll see the silkworm desperately reaches up, trying to find a limb, trying to find something low-hanging, trying to find some other surface. And when it can't, it lays the silk flat. And then it walks away a little bit, still spinning, and reaches again and still can't find it. So it keeps doing this. And eventually, this very thin silk trail is laid over the entire surface. And what they'll do is stack different, sort of like, stretched canvases that they release the worms upon. The many worms working together, bumping into each other, nudging each other aside, on occasion going over each other with the silk, I imagine. They eventually cover this entire surface with their matted single strands of silk. And this just goes on and on. Now, occasionally, what'll happen is for whatever reason, they miss a spot or there's a very thin spot. Now, some of the other literature shows in photos, what they'll do is they'll turn out the lights, they'll shine a spotlight on the thin area. All the worms will be attracted by the light, congregate in that area, and patch up that spot. So the people also need to participate by herding the worms into the sparse areas. So here you see the details of some of the fiber. Here you see daytime, them working with the finished product. It's up to the manufacturers decide how thick they want it. So how long do they leave the worms on the surface to continue building up layers? You can see all the little fine, almost looks like spun glass, right, from old Christmas decorations. You see all the detail of that. And then what you can do then is you can actually go back and start to peel the surface away from whatever the substrate is. The substrate might be paper, the substrate might be canvas, stretch canvas, but you can start to peel it away. And here you can see the worms are still there, going about their business as the employee pulls it apart. Notice you can see through. It starts to look like, again, a very transparent, lacy type of material. This gives you a little bit better idea. You can see there is some, this is a fairly thin one, so there are lace-like gaps in the fiber. Thicker ones have no gaps at all. It's more like heavy paper. And so here they are peeling it apart. This one's a bit more dense than the one we just saw. Okay, and they just keep going at it. They can test a corner to see how thick it is. They can allow the worms to continue to go, and on and on. Now, this is the sample that came in your collection for this month. And here's a little bit of a detail of it, and you get a sense of that. One of the things I want you to take note of, and I'm going to stop for just a second, is, and this is what made me suspect it wasn't paper when I received my very, very first one, is it doesn't really crinkle and wear, and when you tie it, it doesn't pleat like paper might. It has a little bit more of what looks like to me what I imagine elephant skin to look like. Okay, if that makes any sense at all. So it has sort of a skin-like wrinkle to it. It looks a little bit like my skin at this age, but it's not a papery kind of crinkle. And the texture is ever so slightly different. So these are all examples. Notice that elephant skin-like texture on every single piece. Okay, so these are all different colors. Now, in this particular one, this is a little bit thinner sample. So let me, I think this is the one I have. These are all dyed. This is a type of dyeing called sarasa that we've covered before in this. And if we get really close, look up here, okay? So because there's light shining through the back, and it's on a probably a white paper foundation, you can see that lace-like effect. Now, there are others that are much thicker than this. This particular one just happens to be a thin sheet, but it gives you an idea of the somewhat randomness of the covering. Now we're going back to the sample, the detail of the sample you have, and I want you to contrast that, what I'm calling elephant skin, to the texture here. This particular texture, so that you're not confused by it, this is actually a leather obi, and the leather obi also cracks differently. So like leather, as it dries out, it'll get little crack marks in it and so forth, which you see in this one. So this is not the Mayusugata. It's animal leather, not silkworm silk. Then one other additional thing I've noticed on a few of them, most of them are just fine, but on a few, there's a little bit of a pilling effect if it's been tied often. So just like a, say, cotton polyester blend fabric that you've washed in the machine several times, or a sweater that starts to get pills on it, because this is not woven and the fibers are just laying there, a lot of abrasion may cause a little bit of pilling. So here you see the detail of a wear spot, okay, with some of it coming. And then this is what I'm calling a little bit of pilling at the edge, where some of this portion has sort of migrated off to the edge and is standing up like the pilling we find in wool. Okay, so going back again, thanks to the label that finally came, I knew what I had. Thanks to Barbara for her contributions and her good memory in knowing she had seen it somewhere in a book. That's what motivates me to do this type of thing. Let me see, let me stop the share. That's what motivates me to do this type of work, is it's the search, it's the research, it's the game of finding and ferreting out all this information that makes it fun for me. And so all of you contributing your ideas or corrections, when I make a mistake or I've misspoken, please do correct me. I want to know that. If you want to wonder out loud, gee, I wonder if it could be this instead, then by all means let me know and I will respond, letting you know why it's not that, or perhaps explore what you suggest and present that as well. Okay, so we'll go ahead and sign off now for the YouTube version, and I'll ask the rest of you to come on as we continue our discussion. Okay, thank you all.